Howdy BookTube, Chelsea the Reading Outlaw here to do the big one, the big kahuna, the year-end video, my best reads of 2016. I read 160 books in the year of 2016, and I have 13 books and 2 pieces of fan fiction. So I only have 15 things, so less than 10% of what I read actually made it into the top. That's usually pretty good average for me. That's kind of where I try and keep the number limited to, kind of raking through and finding that really just like top level. I'm just going to go through them chronologically, the best ones I read as I read them starting way back in January, which means we're going all the way back to Going Clear, Scientology, Hollywood, and the Prison of Belief by Lawrence Wright. For those of you who have been watching this channel for any length of time, you will know that I have just the teeniest, huge obsession with Scientology, and this is part of the book that started that. I actually watched the documentary of this book in late 2015, and then picked up the audiobook in early 2016. I've actually listened to it a couple of times since then. It's one of the few books that I've ever reread on audio, but I absolutely love it. I think it's absolutely fascinating. It's an incredibly well done piece of journalistic nonfiction that goes into the history, the founding, and the current iterations of the Church of Scientology. It speaks to several people involved throughout the process. It goes through all of L. Ron Hubbard's old writings. Really, really recommend it, even if you don't necessarily have any interest in Scientology. It's just a really great example of journalistic nonfiction. The next one that I'm going to recommend is The Lies of Lockemora by Scott Lynch. I will recommend the whole Gentleman Bastards series. This book is like my jam. Ragtag, found family, boys having capers and being con artists, basically. And it just ticks all my boxes. Could not more highly recommend. This is the first one in the series. It is gorgeous. It is beautifully written. And I just hope that the last book in the series is actually going to end up coming out in 2017 like it's supposed to. Next up is Perfect Days by Rafael Montes. I picked up during a Genreathon because it is a like thriller mystery, and that's not usually something that I read. Well, it's a thriller. It's not a mystery. And that's not something that I normally read, but I was recommended it by Joss over at Squibbles Reads, and I am so thankful that she actually recommended it to me. This book is all about a young man from South America, and he essentially falls in love with a woman that he meets out at a club one night who is a writer. He follows her home. He begins to stalk her. He ends up kidnapping her and taking her into the woods. It's incredibly creepy. It really sticks with you. I had a lot of quibbles with the ending. I will link the video in which I talk about all of that down below. And I'm still thinking about this book months later, and I just really think that there's no higher recommendation you can give a book. Next up is the Sunstone series by Stepyan Sejic. This is a series of graphic novel, lesbian, BDSM erotica that is just so beautifully drawn and has such wonderful relationships. It is such a great exploration of the BDSM community if that's something that you are new to. It's also just really sweet, and it's really nice to see queer relationships that just so far are ending happily and are not without their problems, but are also not composed of all tragedy. And like I said, the art is just absolutely gorgeous. Next up is If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo. This is an Own Voices story written about a trans girl named Amanda and her story as she moves to a new high school and tries to form a new life for herself. We learn about kind of some of her history in her old town and why it is that she's had to move to live with her dad and to stay in a new location. It tackles everything that you love in a high school novel: first loves, first parties, first trouble, first prom, all of those things, but it does it through the lens of Amanda being trans. And so it really does a great job of making her transness a part of the story, but not the entirety of the story, which is always something that's nice to see balanced, especially in young adult literature. Then we have Shrill by Lindy West, another nonfiction pick. I read several essay collections this year, all of which I debated including in my top 10 because I really love the essay format. This one's the one that I'm going to have to actually recommend. It is absolutely hilarious. It tackles so many issues that ring so true for me. Things like being fat in public, having an abortion, being open about your abortion, being open about your gender politics, being humorous, being willing to talk to the people who sit across the aisle from you, being willing to confront your trolls and those people who seem to be out to cause you harm, to see what's going on there. All of that and more is covered in Shrill, what it's like to be a loud, confident woman. Please pick it up. Lindy's voice just comes through so strongly. Then we have Homegoing by Ya Jessie. This is one of the few literary fiction books that I read this year. This is a book about two sisters, Effia and Essie, who are captured from the same tribe in Africa and then sent on two very different life paths. One is married off to a white colonist and slave trader. The other one becomes a slave and is shipped to America. And in each subsequent chapter, we follow the life story as these two branches of the family unfold, obviously through very different circumstances. There are meetings and intertwinings throughout, and the way that Jessie is able to pick up all those storylines and wrap them together at the end really just knocked the wind out of me. I didn't read this book until like almost 3/4 of the way through the year, but I'm so happy that I finally did. Even if literary fiction is not your thing, there is something in this book that you will love that is for everybody. I will link a further review video down below where I will go into even more detail about the book and my thoughts. Please go check out that review and check out that book. I cannot more highly recommend Homegoing. Then we have Rosemary Andrew by Shannon McGuire. This is the first book in the October Day series. I'm just loving the series as a whole. This book is an urban fantasy series, which is not normally my jam. That's kind of a theme running through this year's best of list. But this is way heavier on the fantasy than it is on the urban of the urban fantasy. And we follow the fae courts and the various machinations of fairy politics. And we follow October Day, or Toby, who is a changeling. She is also a detective, so she works in every book to kind of solve crimes related to various happenings in the fairy kingdoms. I'm only in the second book, but I'm really excited to have this be a series that I power through in 2017. After that comes Luck in the Shadows by Lynn Welling. This was a late in the year Magical Space Pussycats read, and I loved it. It was just it's very classic epic fantasy. So if all of those things, those tropey things from epic fantasy really don't jive with you, this might not be the book for you, but I don't even care. Our intrepid hero, our young apprentice, the love that blossoms between the two of them, everything about this book just warms my heart thinking about it. This is another series I'm really looking forward to getting to in 2017, but the way that Fwelling just kind of lays the foundation for Alec and Sarah Gill to fall in love is just something that I'm so excited to watch unfold. After that comes Beyond Shame by Kit Roca. Obviously, duh, I feel like I don't even need to talk about this. If I could wreck all 13 books for you, I would, and I do. But if you're not willing to make the commitment, at least start with number 1. Post-apocalyptic, erotica, feminist, empowered, sex positive, super sexy, polyamorous fiction. Those are like all my buzzwords that I just yelled at you, so I don't have a higher way to recommend it. Then we have Hex by Thomas Old Hoyvelt. This is one of the horror books that I read this year that still creeps the shit out of me. This is about the Black Rock Witch who has her lips and her eyes sewn shut, and what happens when the community that she lives in finally decides to buck tradition and maybe open her eyes and mouth. This book is crazy. This book is fucking crazy. I'm still thinking about the ending of this book and reconciling with how I feel about the ending of this book, but this book is insane. You have to check it out. Then we have The Best Man by Richard Peck. This book is basically about a young man going through life trying to define the male role models that he has for himself. So it talks about his relationship with his dad, his relationship with his uncle who is gay, his relationship with his best friend who is female, and his relationship with a new substitute teacher in town who is also homosexual. There are very light instances of bullying and hate crimes. There's also discussion of things like gender politics and gender dynamics and choice and love and all of those things, but it's done on a level for middle graders. So it's really kind of a nice, easy introduction that doesn't feel preachy or pedantic, which is very nice. And the last actual published novel that I'm going to wreck is one that I literally just finished last night. It's going to be my last read of 2016. It's It by Stephen King. Yes, the clown book. Yes, the big one. This book is like 1,100 pages long, hence why I just finished it. There's one scene in this book that, with the utmost of caveats, I had huge problematic issues with. I will be talking about that in a review of it that will go up in early 2017. Other than that, I feel like this book did so many things so well. Small town life, domestic horror, the concept of youth and innocence and imagination and how that combats the evil of life, how evil embodies itself and how horror manifests itself. Everything I love about Stephen King done in this book to a T, with the exception of that one scene. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. And then lastly, there are 2 pieces of fan fiction that I read this year that I wanted to mention because they absolutely make the best list. They qualify with some of the best published fiction that I read this year. They are absolutely fantastic. The first one is called Frustration. This is actually a birthday fic that was written for me by Kay Taylor Ray for my ship of choice, my number one undying ship that there's very little fan fiction for, and that is the Wesley Crusher William Riker ship from Star Trek TNG. Yes, I will fight you on it. Yes, we can talk about it. Hit me up in the comments. But she wrote me just the most adorable little piece of fan fiction for my birthday, and I could not be more grateful. I've never had somebody make something like that for me before, especially something that is so perfectly me in so many ways. So I just had to include it. It's the best. It's one of the best things I read this year. It was for me. I can't not tell you guys about it. And then the last thing I'm going to recommend, the last piece of fan fiction I read this year was recommended to me by Claire from Claire Russo, because she knows that I have fallen in love with some Les Mis ships this year, specifically the Enjolras Grantier ship. So she recommended me Eyes to Serve, Hands to Learn by Miri Dryad. I will link to the fiction down below. It is the best discussion of negotiating kink that I have ever read in my entire life. And the pining kind of slow burn build to the end and the confessions of how these 2 characters feel about each other, I was dying. I was melting into a puddle reading this fiction on Christmas morning. I absolutely loved it. If BDSM, kink, submissive stuff is not your thing, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one, but if you don't have a problem with it or you're willing to check it out, this is a wonderful place to start. And that's it. That's my best of 2016, you guys. This year was a fucking trash fire in a lot of ways and for so many people. And it's still not stopping. Rest in peace, Carrie Fisher. I still can't talk about it. But there were still bright points. There were still highlights. Still good things for us to talk about. Let me know down below some of the best stuff that you read this year. Some of the best things that you're looking forward to reading in 2017. Tell me some of the worst stuff you read this year. That's always a fun conversation to have. As always, hit me up on all the social media if you have comments or questions. Like, subscribe. Until next time, take care of yourself and take care of each other. Happy reading.